Welcome back to Sonic Speed Reading, and today we are covering the milestone 75th issue and the conclusion to the Sonic Rider saga. If you're not caught up with the story so far, got a playlist for you, or as always, I highly recommend you check out the comic books for yourself. I'm not going to cover every little thing, and you will miss some really cool stuff just going by these videos. Also, we're not going to waste any time doing any kind of recap. We're just going to jump straight into it, and afterwards, I'll give you my thoughts about the arc overall. With all that said, let's get into it. We pick back up in the engine room of the shuttle, now careening towards Central City. Our heroes are still desperately trying to get out. Tails and Bell are trying to override the system, keeping the door in place, and Amy is trying to smash through it with the Pico hammer. Now, she does make a little bit of progress, but unfortunately, once she breaches the metal, steam shoots out and scalds her. So even if they can bust through the door, that would come at a massive cost, and they certainly don't have the time to get through it even if they could. Everybody's overheated and they are desperate. So that's the situation for the folks on the shuttle. But above it, we see Sonic racing to the scene, followed closely behind by the Diamond Cutters, and followed up by the Babylon Rogues discussing the situation at hand. Now, thieves they may be, they're not evil. They do show concern for the folks of Central City, but instead of following along with the rest of the heroes, Jet has another idea and tells his team to follow him for a different plan, and we'll find out what that is later. The comic next shifts its attention over to the Diamond Cutters, and they very quickly sort out this particular plot thread. Mimic has been gallivanting around pretending to be this character known as Duo for quite a long time, but all of that falls apart as he is called out by the name Mimic through a walkie-talkie he was keeping in his scarf. Is that kind of a sloppy way to just get this thing situated? Yeah, but we got a lot to get done in this comic book. So yes, Mimic is exposed, and Tangle and Whisper immediately give chase. So there's another set of heroes no longer focused on the shuttle. Lanolin just sits there stunned. She is experiencing what we call in the business a character arc, some growth, all that fun stuff. We'll get back to her too. We got a lot of characters to keep track of in this big chunky issue, and we now turn our attention to the big bad of the story, Clutch, as he has his security drag along the folks that he had captured on the main deck of the shuttle, which includes Knight, Charmy, Jewel, and a couple of nameless people we don't care about. He's about to hop in a pretty floating Cadillac and leave these guys to their fate. And I'm surprised the security detail is fine with all of this. Like, they're just dressed like bouncers at a concert, and they're just fine leaving these people here to die. Maybe they're part of Clutch's crew and they're just disguised like this and they're down for murder. It doesn't actually matter. What does matter is that Sonic arrives and disrespectfully drags Clutch across the ground, tossing him to finally face him. And I know some of you get sick of the Archie references, but I'm sorry. This immediately reminds me of Sonic doing this exact same thing to Silver in the Archie series. A very disrespectful move, and I am here for it. This is the first time Sonic and Clutch have met. And before Clutch can even finish the "you must be Sonic," that's when he gets slammed to the ground. Sonic does not have any time for any villain monologues or any kind of garbage. They have 20 minutes before self-destruction of the shuttle, even though it's already going to be crashing to the city below. It's a whole mess. A fight breaks out between the two, which is mostly just Sonic dodging the cane shots from Clutch. Clutch compliments the speed of the Hedgehog, but says that nobody's faster than his trigger finger, which, I mean, he's let off a lot of shots and not one of them's hit. Regardless, we are not done with the interruptions as Surge and Kit arrive on the scene, landing with an electrical blast, and once again proclaiming that they quit. Clutch is furious and says he will not be beaten by a pack of insolent children, and I think this is the first time they mention, and they mention this a lot in this issue, that Clutch is an elderly character. I mean, he moves well for his age, whatever that age may be, but as we will see with other characters, the opossum is older than I guess I initially thought he was. Anyway, Sonic frees the two bugs, they catch him up to speed, the security detail finally shows some semblance of sense and decides to sit out whatever this crazy superpowered fight is. So yes, the opossum is all kinds of screwed right now. Meanwhile, we get back to the engine room, and one quick stupid little conversation changes everything. Espio simply asks what happened with Rough and Tumble. During one of the side stories where these two clashed with Cream and her mother, they promised Vanilla they would turn over a new leaf, and I love that off-page intimidation that Vanilla provides in this series, by the way. Anyway, these two explain that they did turn a new leaf. They just took a job to wear these silly mascot costumes, and Mr. Clutch just kept asking them to do more and more. Dawn points out they could have just quit. Apparently they didn't know they could do that, so they decide they quit and then decide to help the heroes get out of the engine room. They head on up to the door and they get it loose. This is interesting for a couple of reasons. We have a couple of powerhouse characters in their midst. We have Amy Rose and her hammer, and we have Vector the crocodile, both fairly strong characters, and neither of them could get through the door. But this duo right here managed to do it. So that is an interesting feat that a lot of folks might overlook. These are pretty powerful characters. Now keep in mind, they don't get the door completely open without extra help, and it is burning everybody's hands, but they're the ones to really start making a difference. And yeah, that's all I really have to say about this scene. Let's get back to Sonic. He tells the two bugs to go get everybody else loose while he rescues Surge and Kit from the artillery now let loose by Clutch. So all kinds of chaos is happening here. Sonic is trying to help Surge and Kit, telling them they should team up against Clutch. Surge wants nothing to do with it, trying to punch the dude mid-air, and unfortunately that distraction costs them as an explosion sets off next to them, sending all three flying from the egg stream gear. And I've been questioning the weird shape of this thing the whole time. Been questioning Eggman's motives because it's Eggman. I was waiting for the other shoe to drop, and folks, it finally happens here as the screen pops loose on the extreme gear, and then arms and legs shoot out of it, and Eggman's face appears on screen. This, folks, is technically a metal Eggman. That's right, Sonic has been riding a robo copy this entire time. You know how I feel about my robot doubles? We're gonna have a great time back in March Madness. Oh my god. Oh, considering other things, oh my god. Oh my god. Anyway, I will freak out a little bit more about Robo Eggy in a bit, but the good doctor has finally revealed himself at the tail end of this journey, and we now have a villain on villain battle as Robo Eggman takes on Clutch, and he also calls the opossum old. Eggman's not exactly a spring chicken, so that really should tell you just how old this green little gremlin actually is. So there's all kinds of craziness happening in this fight. Sonic is trying to battle the opossum while trying to save his life at the same time as Eggman really just wants to kill this thing. Clutch, meanwhile, keeps slapping that remote of his, sending the artillery wild. And while all of that is happening, Surge has been powering up. And I've never noticed this before, but she kind of has something akin to Shadow's inhibitor rings. Her bracelets have these lightning rod protrusions pop on out while she lets out an attack she calls overcharge while she's throwing up the horns. I love this girl. She could have teamed up with Sonic, but instead she's gonna do her own thing and takes out all three enemies at once. But unfortunately, this takes it out of Surge. She's given it everything she's got. She's pushed herself too hard. She's got nothing left to give. And even though it seems like she took out everybody else, unfortunately, the extreme gear was built a little more sturdy than most of Eggman's other robots, and it quickly recovers from the attack, with Eggman saying, "You think I can't build a Surge protector?" Which is funny, play on words, the name and everything. But yeah, the robot gets up and takes off with Clutch. Now, this is interesting for a couple of reasons. First off, I don't know how I feel about Eggman always showing up and just wrecking any other villain that shows up in this series. On one hand, it shows like why he is the big bad of the entire franchise, but at the same time, it would be kind of nice to see if anybody else could really stand a chance against the good doctor. But Clutch is an interesting case, and I will talk about him later. For now, Eggman and Clutch are out of the picture. And as Sonic recovers, Surge talks a little smack, saying she let him off easy, but don't go thinking they're friends, and also tells him he better survive this so they can have a fight fair and square. We turn our attention back to the other heroes who, now having escaped the engine room, are back in the control center. Unfortunately, no matter how good Tails and Bell are, getting through the tech and the software doesn't mean squat if the shuttle itself is way too damaged, and yes, it's way too damaged. So that particular option to get it back on course is off the table. But at the very least, the two different sets of heroes are reunited. So we got Chaotix all together again, except for Mighty. It's always Mighty. I'll never say they're complete until we get Mighty back. Dawn and Night are reunited, and they're adorable. And on top of that, we finally see what the Babylon Rogues have been up to. Just like they helped guide guide the cars in the caravan a couple issues ago, they now guide those same flying cars with towing cables to get the shuttle turned a different way from Central City. The Babylon Rogues and the many fans who've been following along with Clean Sweep are the ones to save the city, and I think that's incredibly cool since they always leave Sonic to do all the heavy lifting. This time, everybody else literally is doing that. And speaking of Sonic, he slaps into the side of the windshield like a bug. This startles Belle and Tails, and Amy, not missing a beat, shoves everyone out of the way, screaming, "I'm coming, Sonic," and smashes the window with a hammer, jumping into the arms of her favorite blue hedgehog. Once again, for anybody who's missed Amy being, well, a little more Amy, it's very clear her affection for Sonic has not diminished whatsoever. This was an incredibly cute moment in a dire situation. The heroes are now all reunited. The rogues continue to guide the cars and in turn the shuttle away from the city, and everything looks like it's going to plan, but unfortunately, even with all this effort, it's not enough. They can steer the shuttle different directions, but no matter what they do, this thing is going down, and the self-destruct is still active. There is nothing they can do about those two facts. Even Tails is stumped on what to do. There is no safe place to put this thing. That is until Jewel comes up with a solution. She points towards the Emeraldville ruins, an abandoned town that was wrecked in the war with Eggman that was repurposed to be Restoration HQ. And they give this heartbreaking shot of the little makeshift garden and garden shack that not only serves as the underground entrance for the restoration, but this is also Silver's garden. So Sonic tells the Babylon Rogues to guide everybody towards Restoration HQ. And while this does suck, it does get worse, as Amy asks, "Is Restoration HQ empty?" And Jewel responds with tears in her eyes, "It's better than the city." So yes, while all the civilian life will be saved in Central City, if things go as currently planned, there will still be heavy casualties. Whoever is in Restoration HQ right now will die. But Sonic is Sonic, and as he points out, the ship has not crashed or exploded yet. And he turns to Jet and issues him a challenge. See who between the two of them can rescue the most people. And with renewed motivation, the Chaotix, Sonic, Amy, Tails, Belle, and even Jet all make their way towards Restoration HQ. Meanwhile, we turn our attention back to Tangle, Whisper, and Mimic, and I'll be real, when I first read this, I completely forgot this was another plot we had to follow, as we see the trio battling among the many traps that were initially built for that final event of Clean Sweepstakes. And while this does look cool, and God, I wish this scene and a lot of these other action scenes were animated, Mimic quickly gets away, getting lost in the crowd. And unfortunately, the two heroes don't have any time to hunt him down, as the course and all the traps just floating midair are now falling apart. Thankfully, Lanolin finally proves a little useful, and she announces over her sound-based whispin that she is with the Diamond Cutters and her team can help guide them to safety. She then turns her attention to Tangle and Whisper and apologizes for all the mistakes she's made. But Tangle tells her to save it. They're on the same team and they're here to help people, with Whisper jumping in saying that she also has made mistakes. Tangle is still ticked, but that's a conversation for later. I'll be real, I know a lot of fans don't like Lanolin because of how she treated Silver, all these very silly details, and yeah, I do think her priorities were a little out of whack in issue 74, chasing down Sonic, but I don't know. I don't think she really has a lot to apologize for. She's just doing her best with the information she had available to her. Regardless, that's just me, and this scene is here to tell you that Lanolin, while a lot of you guys considered her to be a jerk through these many issues, has gone on an emotional journey, and she is growing, and she'll be a better leader and all that crap. And if I sound dismissive, I'm very sorry. I should state I love this character. I like all the Diamond Cutters. But yes, there you go. All of that's finally wrapped up, and we turn our attention back to Restoration HQ as Sonic arrives on the scene. We have an adorable little rivalry between between the green bird and the blue hedgehog as the two race to save people. While that happens, Tails and Belle head to the machine shop. Since it's so far away from everything else in the HQ, it's likely they didn't hear the announcement in the main hall. So they're gonna go down and warn everyone to leave. They get the job done fast, but there is still one more person to get out of here. And that is Belle's little Motobug, as she lovingly calls it, Motobud. The amazingly still unnamed orangutan points out that she has been struggling for weeks to get Motobud back up and running. His circuitry is exposed and he can't risk being moved yet. She loves this dude so much, she intends to fix him before the shuttle crashes down. But she won't do it alone, as Tails and hippie orangutan, still unnamed, but we'll call him Not Rotor, both agree to help fix this guy. But they don't have a lot of time, as Sonic and Jet finish saving everybody else, including a little cameo character from Evan's fan comic. Silver's sister is now canon. If I can't get the Freedom Fighters, I will happily take cameos from Ghosts of the Future. Sega, don't take the wrong lesson there. Please don't come down on fun little cameos like this. Still pissed as hell with you guys cracking down on the Bumblecast as hard as you are. Conversation for a different time. Where was I? Oh yeah, the shuttle crashes into Restoration HQ and blows the whole thing up. Whoops. Now it looks like Sonic and Jet got everybody out, but Sonic is gonna head back in just to be sure, and this is where we see the line in the sand between these two rivals. Jet has done enough. He's not risking his neck in a fiery inferno. Sonic just shrugs it off, saying, "Suit yourself," and heads back in. And when he does, he comes across his best buddy, Tails, who was still here and did survive, along with Belle, and once again, the orangutan that's not named, but is doing, I think, a Spider-Man reference here. Even if not, he looks like a baller holding up rubble, trying to keep Belle safe. Thankfully, Sonic and Tails are ready to rescue. Sonic tells Belle to use her iconic little kick to smack the big beam that they're holding in place so he can get in and grab everybody. He does, and they race off to the exit, but unfortunately, some rubble falls, and it's looking bad for Sonic until the Motobud comes to life. And not only that, it has some extra upgrades thanks to some extreme gear, and now it can fly, as they say in this comic, like a real bug. So yes, all the heroes survive, and they return with Amy once again overjoyed and embracing her blue hedgehog. As Belle looks over the rubble that was Restoration HQ, breaking down and crying, Jet approaches Sonic. And I think this is the least annoying this character has ever been. He's willing to concede a tie for their competition on one simple condition. Sonic owes him a rematch without any distractions, no conditions, just the two of them in a race. So Sonic can see what Jet can really do. And Sonic, of course, agrees. And Jet, along with the rest of the rogues, take off. The Diamond Cutters, having finishing their work with the race crowd, arrive on the scene, with Tangle approaching her lifelong friend, as Jules says that she has failed. The restoration is done. Tangle picks her up with her long tail and shows her the reality of the situation. The restoration was never a building. It has always been the people who immediately set to work on helping each other, including a Daniel Barnes with a Sega Saturn logo helping out Gigi in their amazing pants. I don't know if there's any other IDW crew cameos in this, but I know those two pointed it out on social media, and I thought it was adorable. So yes, Restoration HQ is done and dusted, but overall, the heroes are victorious, and they all pitch in together to help clean up the mess. But that's not where the story ends, not quite yet. We have one more scene, as Sonic and Tails arrive at Tails' house. Yes, the same one from Sonic Battle, just the fox's giant head. I love it. But as they approach the front door, they notice it's ajar. They go inside, and Sonic points out that everything looks normal, everything's in place. And I love the little detail of showing Sonic's shoes being set aside. Since he is wearing his rider gear, he did store them here. I also hate, again, that they once again reconfirm that the socks are a part of the shoes, and no, I will never call them anything but socks, because thinking they're anything else is insane. These are not Santa boots. Argue all you want, with me in the comments. I don't care. Sega's not always right. Sometimes they do stupid things. They often do stupid things. This is one of the stupidest. Speaking of shoes, you have Sonic 3 out in the theaters, but we can't get some proper Shadow shoes for sale. You got Reebok doing this stupid garbage here. Where are the shoes? Just let us buy the damn shoes. Why is this such a challenge every movie? I still don't have my Knuckles Tims. What is happening? Anyway, yeah, I'm sorry. Back to the scene. Everything is in place except for one important thing. One very important thing. The lab's generator core. And that generator core was a Chaos Emerald. And we end this story at the location of that emerald as it sits on an altar in a room that would make H.R. Geiger proud. And that is where the story ends, on a lovely, lovely cliffhanger. Now, when this comic first came out, I had just finished up and published my last video on the IDW run overall, and while I have always enjoyed these books, and I certainly understand the limitations they have and how things can be perceived if you are solely focused on one thing for way too long, like I have been for Sonic stuff, I was feeling ultimately a little bit burned out. I know everybody is sick and tired of me comparing Archie and Fleetwade to what IDW is doing right now, and as you have heard in even recent coverage, I still will make some jabs here and there. It gets exhausting hearing old heads like me keep comparing the good old days to what's happening right now, especially if you're enjoying what is provided, because what is provided ultimately is very well put together, even with slower chapters. But that being said, do I feel that they have turned things around in terms of the pacing for IDW stories? Overall, I do think this particular run of chapters, and in turn this overall Sonic Riders arc, was a lot of fun. Far from perfect in my eyes, but now that we have the full story and we can go back and enjoy it on its own terms and don't have to wait month to month for every little thing to come out, I do think that yes, this is one of the stronger arcs that IDW Sonic has provided to us, and regardless of anything else, I do think it's pretty awesome they got to the 75th issue milestone, and I am thankful that they do carry on the tradition from Archie that is making a big stinking deal out of every 25th issue they hit, because that is a big deal. And regardless of whatever you think about IDW versus Archie versus anything else, this comic is still carrying the legacy of everything that's come before it, and I'm so thankful that Sonic is still so incredibly important in the comic medium, because he has been ever since the early 90s, and I hope that does not change. I always want this to be a priority. And this comic showed a lot of love to the Sonic Riders era, on top of giving a lot of interesting characters a chance to shine, giving us a focus on a completely different bad guy from Eggman, and even giving Sonic a chance to interact with the rest of the cast and the world at large in a completely different way. The idea of the Phantom Rider was a lot of fun. I had fun with the reveal that it was Sonic himself, not some new rival, and I loved seeing all of this from the perspective of Sonic. And that works doubly well because this is obviously a reference to Kamen Rider, and I slapped my head when I got to the end of issue 69 because it was obvious that they took the idea of Kamen Rider and decided to say, what if we had a literal Sonic Rider? And that's exactly what they did. And I think that type of story works incredibly well in the format of Sonic Riders, and that combined works well with shonen-styled storytelling, similar to tournament arcs, Sentai stories, all those fun things that a lot of the fans of the early 2000s era of Sonic the Hedgehog, so you folks that grew up with Sonic Riders, Sonic X, the adventure games, I'd imagine a lot of this resonated with you. The overall vibe was a lot of fun, and I think it's clear that the folks working on this particular arc grew up loving those particular elements of the franchise. And in that sense, I think it worked very well. It was also nice to see them neatly wrap up a lot of plot elements that they have been playing around with for quite a long time. It's great to see Moto Bud back in action with some fun little upgrades. I think a lot of us obviously knew that there was going to be a turn for Lanolin after everyone's been so frustrated with her. I think it's obvious they were going to give her room to grow, and while I have compared her to Sally in the past, and I will be elaborating on that point in a future video, if you don't like that, don't watch it. I have said before, and I will say again, Lanolin is clearly her own person with a very distinct personality, and it was fun watching that continue to be explored and allowing allowing her a chance to grow, because she clearly will after all of this manipulation from Mimic. I will once again say that I do think Tangle was a little off base being mad at Lanolin. I know it was frustrating seeing her side with Duo and all that early on, but we as the readers have always known that Duo was Mimic. Lanolin didn't. Mimic is the one who has been manipulating everybody here. Lanolin doesn't need to apologize to anybody, in my opinion. Certainly doesn't need to be scolded by Tangle, of all people. I think she did fine with the information she had available to her, and she was also burned by her team. Tangle and Whisper didn't trust her. Granted, they had pretty decent reason not to. She was physically attacked by the Phantom Rider, and I'm sorry, but Whisper has proven to be completely emotionally unstable. Like multiple times. I could rant on and on and on, but I am going to come to Lanolin's defense, because not a lot of readers, at least the ones babbling on social media, give her a chance because of their precious silver, or they love their quiet wolf, or whatever. But I'm gonna give it up to the lamb here. I think she's a great character. Anyway, that's enough about the Diamond Cutters. Clutch is... I'm conflicted on Clutch. I love his design, I love his motivation, I love the role he plays. I don't know if I'm a big fan of his plans, and his overall personality leaves me a little wanting. I can see they're trying to give him a little more nuance here instead of just a straight up sinister, vile critter. We see him apologize to Mimic at one point. He tries to keep his temper under control, and unfortunately, the more screen time with a character like this will just make them less scary overall. I do like the character, and I do like this setting, and I do like the stakes at play, even in the finale there, but when you sit there and start to unpack it a little bit, I don't know what he was trying to do. They do explain things here and there throughout this arc, but it's so incredibly vague that it doesn't immediately pop to mind. And if he wants to keep out of the spotlight, he's doing a pretty miserable job of it, skirting very close with some very close friends of Sonic the Hedgehog and Amy Rose and all these characters he doesn't want anything to do with. But it's because he went out of his way to mess with their extreme gear, like not even to kill them, just to get them out of the race. That was his plan to get the heroes off his scent, by sabotaging their stuff. Like, of course they're going to investigate that. Obviously they're going to investigate that. He kicked off his own downfall. And yes, while I understand that he should be weaker once he is exposed, he works best in the shadows, I was a little deflated when I saw that he didn't really have a plan B at all. I just thought he'd be a little bit more plotting than what he was through this whole story. I do think this and some other elements could have used a little bit more time to cook. Like, if I had a better idea of like a bigger plan, like if this event was going to be utilized to do something incredibly dastardly, then maybe I would feel this character was utilized a bit better. But as it stands, he's just kind of there until he gets his ass kicked in at the end of the story. I mean, seriously, Sonic didn't even know this dude existed until that last fight, and then the possum is dragged off by the actual villain of the series. I don't know, maybe I was expecting this guy to actually pull off whatever plot he had going for him. And I guess in a way, he still kind of got what he wanted. Restoration HQ was demolished, but I don't know. I felt a lot of his plans and a lot of the things they were dropping through these months didn't lead to much of anything in terms of Clutch's motivation overall. That being said, I'm not upset with the setup for this story and having a lot of these stories tied up, because my biggest issue with this arc overall is I really like some of these ideas and I really wanted to see these explored a little bit further, and maybe they will be in coming months. I'm thinking specifically of the Phantom Rider stuff. They had a really cool concept, a fun new way to utilize Sonic, and I don't think it got as much love as it could have. Sonic shows up as the Phantom Rider in one issue, and then he's exposed to most of the tertiary cast in the following issue. And in that same issue, everybody who knew who Sonic was immediately figured out why he's doing what he's doing. And that is something else I am also conflicted on, at least a little bit. I felt there could have been a bit more drama between Sonic and the other characters. There could have been some really fun fights, things of that nature. Maybe this changes how the world sees Sonic the Hedgehog. There's potential for some really crazy shifts in this world, something that we could really explore for a while. But with that said, I do also kind of appreciate common sense. See, a lot of stories like this having your identity exposed is a common thing with comic books. Surprise, surprise. While I have seen some stories like this utilized to really explore betrayal and conflicted feelings between a hero and people close to them, I have also seen characters act out of character for the sake of drama. That does not happen here. Everybody who learns that the Phantom Rider is Sonic also knows Sonic. He's very clear on his moral standing, his attitude, and why he does the things he does. No, he's not going to explain himself to everybody. He's just going to keep doing what he thinks is right, and I'm very thankful that they take the time to explain that in this arc. And again, I think this is kind of a callback to the characterization we've seen of the character back in Sonic X. I joked about it before, but there is an episode where it looks like Sonic has turned on the world when he's just not going along with whatever garbage Eggman is trying to shill. He doesn't try to debate him, he doesn't try to give him a second chance, none of that. He sees a problem and he goes to solve it, even if everybody else on Earth thinks he's doing the wrong thing. He doesn't care. And I do like that there's a balance here between what we've seen in the early 2000s version of Sonic versus one that has been explained to have matured at least a little bit in that time since. I think a lot of elements here are showing a return to form for characterization, something we have seen quite a bit with Shadow, and I think we're seeing a bit of that with Amy, and I think we are seeing that here with Sonic as well. I am getting on a bit of a tangent here, I do apologize, but my original point was, yes, common sense. Sonic is very clear on who he is, and therefore his friends and his rivals kind of know what to expect from the guy. So they quickly deduce that yes, if Sonic is doing this, then that means that whoever's running this thing is probably the bad guy. And the extra mile here is Whisper going out of her way to review footage and see the little details that differentiate between Sonic and Mimic's version of the Phantom Rider. Normally, when they do clone characters in stuff like this, there are some little details here and there so the reader or the viewer can differentiate between the two characters to indicate that one is a fake, but rarely do the characters in universe ever actually point out those different details themselves. This does frustrate me a little bit because I feel like Whisper could have been a little bit more thorough in terms of Duo and that whole situation with Mimic. Like, yeah, she immediately figured that Duo was a bad guy, but dropped it, and maybe this Phantom Rider stuff is her redeeming herself on that front. Whatever the case, I've never seen an in-universe character really point out specific details being different. It's usually just actions, and they do both here. That's what I mean when I say common sense. It feels like Evan has just seen these tropes way too many times in other media and just said, no, our characters are smarter than that. Does it cut out a lot of fun drama that could be taking place? Yes. Do I wish they could have expanded some of these stories a bit more? Absolutely. But the initial ideas were a lot of fun to begin with, and I do appreciate that these characters aren't complete idiots. And even then, the likes of Tangle and Whisper not telling Lanolin does give us a little bit of drama, and it's obvious that even if the main villain knows who the Phantom Rider is, he is still trying to keep that under wraps because the world sees Sonic as a hero, so they might all come to the same conclusion. If Sonic is trying to disrupt the event, then maybe they will all turn their attention to clean sweep themselves. And that leads me to Surge and Kid. I'm not going to get too deep into their characterization here because I do want to do a deep dive on the two of them specifically very soon. I'm very, very interested in their characterizations, and this was a fun turn for them, being portrayed as heroes. I think this was a lot of fun, and I know a lot of fans were really hoping to see them actually turn to the side of light instead of just pretending to be good guys to infiltrate the Restoration. That is a fairly obvious route for these characters to take, but I still have a sneaking suspicion that the writers are going to break a lot of readers' hearts with these two. We're going to wait to see how their story continues to play a little bit longer before I get into a deep analysis. But as I said before, in my previous coverage of Surge, there is a lot more going on under the surface, and these two are used to explore some very complicated topics and very big, complicated feelings. As for other tertiary characters, nice to see the Chaotix. Don't really have much to say about them. Same with Rough and Tumble. Made me smile. Always happy to see them. Not a whole lot to say about them here. I did like the twist that they were the mascots the entire time. Oh god, the Babylon Rogues, almost forgot about them. Not super important to this story, but at the same time they are. If you're gonna do Sonic Riders, they need to be a part of it. They aren't the central focus, but they certainly added a lot to the story as far as I'm concerned. concerned. And seeing the dynamic between Jet and Sonic in this last issue was a lot of fun, especially after the emotional roller coaster Jet was going on with his jealousy of Surge getting all the attention in that first race. And I love seeing him sit on that winner pedestal like it's a throne, like he belongs there and he's used to it and almost tired of it. And then seeing his frustration with the Phantom Rider, and then even knowing that it's Sonic, still wants to battle the guy. But when push comes to shove and the shuttle is about to crash on Central City, him and his team get to work saving people, putting all that aside and instead telling Sonic he wants a proper race. That was a lot of respect those two characters have shown each other. It was really cool. Jet is a very overlooked rival in this franchise, but these birds brought a whole new style to the franchise, one that a lot of fans have dearly missed, and we see a lot of that vibe in this story. I think overall, this worked almost on the same level as the Metal Virus worked as a Sonic-themed zombie story. This worked as a Sonic-themed race or sports shonen manga, whatever. I know some of you guys get mad if I emphasize the vowel incorrectly. It's weird. It felt like it went on almost a little bit too long, but also not long enough in a lot of other aspects. Really like the idea of the Phantom Rider. I like seeing Sonic struggle to utilize it, and I even like how Eggman was implemented into this story. His interaction with the heroes at the start was hilarious, and while he did have his own motivation, as you would expect, he didn't betray Sonic. The Hedgehog might feel that way because Eggman wanted to get his hands on Clutch himself, but he didn't attempt to attack Sonic at all in any of this. Maybe a little bit in that fight. I mean, he did pat Sonic on the head there for a second, but it does again show a lot of respect the Doctor has for the Hedgehog. Yeah, he wants to take him out, but he wants to be the one to do it. The story of Sonic Riders and a story themed around the vibe of Sonic Riders should focus a lot on rivalry. And each one of the rivals we saw here in this story to Sonic show him a lot of respect in a lot of different ways. Whether that's to immediately trust him, even though it looks like he's doing something fishy in terms of the Phantom Rider stuff, or Eggman understanding how useful Sonic is and willing to team up with him to take down a greater threat, and even willing to keep his end of the bargain in terms of, well, not hurting the Hedgehog at the very least. Like that nanosuit could have done so many nasty things to Sonic, but it never did. And even Surge, while she openly attacked Sonic a lot in this comic, she still showed a lot of respect to the Hedgehog at the end of the journey, telling him to survive so they can finish their fight fair and square. Jet, Surge, and Eggman all have something to prove to themselves and to Sonic. And whether they want to admit it or not, that is showing a lot of respect to the hero of this story. And let's be real, I think a lot of our favorite relationships in this world all revolve around the rivalries. Regardless of who you ship with who, and maybe you want to watch a bird and a hedgehog kiss, I don't know. The rivalry, the competitive nature of it all is what works for me when it comes to the relationships of Sonic the Hedgehog. I said it in other videos, and I'm going to keep emphasizing this because a lot of you guys get mad at me when I talk about the console wars, Sonic versus Mario, all of that. Competition is built into the bones of this franchise, and when Sonic is trying to pick a fight, that's when Sonic's at his best. And I think Riders works as well as it does because not only was it an ambitious game, but it had an ambitious art style and a vibe, and the energy between all of the characters is what motivated you as a player of that game, and it's a motivator for the readers of this book. So I hope they continue to play with that a bit more. As for the future of the franchise, yeah, I do think despite the imperfections I feel exist in this arc, they did a really bang up job, and I am excited for what's next. That's hard for me to do when it comes to IDW because you can just feel the limitations Sega puts on the creators. They can't shift the status quo too much. So it was nice to see the Yellow Chaos Emerald at the end of this story in a place I'm completely unfamiliar with. My initial thought was this had something to do with the black arms. They had black organic material making up the room, and the closest aesthetic I can draw to that is the black arms, but it's not exactly one for one with what we've seen for the alien race. I mean, it would kind of make a little bit of sense considering all the promotion they've done for Shadow recently. And on top of that, we do know that there is a Shadow one-shot story that revolves around a mysterious village, and we can see on the cover that Shadow is holding the Yellow Chaos Emerald, the emerald he's largely associated with these days. So it looks like whatever story is being hinted at here will be followed up with Shadow himself. So maybe it is the black arms, maybe it's something else entirely, but one way or the other, Shadow will be involved. This is one of my favorite arcs from the IDW run. I smiled like an idiot when I saw the return of Motobud. I was very satisfied to see Lanolin turn a corner. The set pieces here were really cool. And again, I really like the Phantom Rider. That transformation pose that Sonic takes, I need that in a statue form. That was so cool. The artist had so much fun putting this stuff together. And I'm sorry if I screwed up any artist names. I know they worked a little bit interchangeably between issues, and issue 75 had 2 different artists. But yeah, it's the same crew I have praised time and time again. I love the writers, I love the artists, the colorists, letterists. All these guys work together to put together some really fun stuff. And the Sonic Rider arc was a lot of fun. And I'm sorry, but it's my point of reference. I am getting more Archie vibes looking at the teaser for the following issue, where we see the Resistance logo falling apart and dusty while all of our characters look on into the horizon. Very reminiscent to Brave New World after they wrapped everything up with Robotropolis and Robotnik himself in early Archie. And I really do hope we get some fun shakeups going forward, because 75 did mark the end of an era with Restoration HQ. I've been wanting them to shake things up for a while personally, and while they did do a decent job building this space up, I wasn't too super attached to it, and I feel like a lot of fans, myself included, were getting a little bit tired of all the motifs that were built on from the days when Sonic Forces was the latest game out for the series. I think a lot of us are still waiting for a time skip or something that shows what happens after Sonic Frontiers. Maybe Sega isn't allowing them to do anything with that. Maybe they have to stay here because whatever's next for Sonic Team takes place immediately after Sonic Frontiers. I don't know. I just know a lot of fans are waiting for Sage to appear in the book, and I am too. And I hope we get to explore more of the world. They can flesh it out a little bit more and do some really fun things. Not to be too nostalgia heavy, but something I did like from Fleetway and from Archie, mostly from Fleetway though, to be fair, is exploring the zones that were in the classic games. They have these unique designs, and in turn, they should have some unique culture in them worth exploring. My buddy Channel Pup has mentioned this a few times. If we're going to be bringing Green Hill back over and over again, then establish it as a home base, give it some world building. I would love to know what the totem poles are all about. Was that an ancient culture? Is that a current culture? I don't know. But be it the classic games or the modern games, anything like that, I think all these different game worlds should be more than just references for this book. I liked the idea back then that the comics were used to expand and explore a lot of elements from the games. I think they can do that here in IDW, and I hope they do. Some of my favorite downtime books were the ones dealing with Angel Island, for instance, and I would like to see a little bit more than just the same generic cities that we have seen time and time and time again in IDW Sonic. Heck, give us some futuristic stuff. We had a bunch of flying cars since they were in Sonic Riders. What's going on there? How's the technology differentiate between cities? Are there different cultures? Whatever. I'm rambling a bit here, and I apologize. Just saying, there's still a lot of potential even within the confines of staying in the game canon. And I think the Riders arc proved that to a lot of different degrees. This was a lot of fun. This explored some fun tropes, some fun anime and manga tropes, and I think they're starting to finally find the balance between longer form storytelling with some of these arcs versus that shorter month-to-month storytelling that they sometimes do. But yeah, my tune has changed ever so slightly since I whined about everything back in issue 69. Nice. They paid off a lot of fun ongoing stories. They gave us some really thrilling settings and some fun ideas that hopefully can be explored a little bit further down the line, and did give us a massive shakeup in terms of locale. So I hope we see that expanded on as well. But yeah, folks, that's going to do it for today. Thank you for joining me as we wrapped up this comic book. I thought 75 was a lot of fun. There's a lot of little things I want to pick apart. I'm excited to see where the Yellow Emerald goes. You'd better believe we'll be talking again about that Eggman robot in March. And yeah, I am once again excited to see what comes next in this series.